Well, you probably do better than people like me with non-notified consents in cases like this.
Oh, most definitely. So in Auckland we have the unitary plan, which is an unusual beast. It's a combination of a regional and a district plan. But without boring everybody to sleep with the detail, essentially the standards for notification are very, very high, and notified hearings are enormously expensive. There's actually a quasi-judicial hearing. Expert witnesses are called. It takes a long time.
And it's expensive.
You end up waiting quite a long time for the decision. So they're the really notorious aspect of the Resource Management Act.
And you know what they're going to say? They're just rituals where the people nearby who think that who can't do the same or haven't got the property value protected are looking after what they see as their interests. I just get so frustrated by the RMA. This view that actually having everyone letting it all hang out for 2 or 3 years gives us anything.
Well, I must say that I believe it's less than 1% of consent applications in Auckland actually end up being notified. So it is becoming a vanishingly rare thing to happen. What is a lot more common is what's called limited notification, where the people in the immediate area are notified. Now, I was the local board member who actually had initial input onto this application, and I said it should be limited notified to the surrounding neighbours. And what normally happens then is that, because that seems reasonable in a case like this, where you've got a helicopter landing pad, a few times a week or 6 times a week. And what they normally do then is go to the neighbours, get their consent, and that deals with the issue. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. So that's why it was non-notified, because the neighbour and the other neighbouring property, which happens to be owned by the applicant, both gave their consent.
All right, Vernon, thank you. That's a thoroughly educated point of view on this particular case, Vernon Tava. Nevertheless, there is the issue, would you be happy if the helicopter came and landed next door on a helipad to your house?
I'd be delighted.
Stephen would like that.
I don't like
you,
the
Ali?
spa that's just over the fence from our place, so you can imagine what my answer would be.
Ali would not like that so much. We talked about this in the lead-up because there was a lot of pushback against this. City councillors in Dunedin have approved Easter Sunday trading to cater for the claimed 65,000 visitors coming to Dunedin in April to see Ed Sheeran. Bylaw went through by 10 votes to 5 after a vigorous debate. What is your position on it? Do you think that this needs to happen to give Dunedin a great image and have everybody go away talking about what a marvellous city it is?
Well, I do. I'm all for people having time off and looking after family and giving people choice of work and things like that. But you can't have a gig like this with an international act and your whole city's closed. Imagine that. That will just exacerbate the jokes about, when you leave New Zealand, make sure you're the last one out of the room, turn the light off, or whatever the saying is. I mean, I got that completely wrong. You'll remember it, Jim, properly. But you know what I mean. You can't have people coming here and say the place is completely dead, which is what you risk. So, I can't believe this even got as much coverage and discussion as it did either.
Even though cities like Barcelona and places in old Europe, don't actually cater to the tourists. I mean, they'll stay shut when they want to stay shut.
They're in the middle of Europe with a potential huge market. We're at the bottom, the arse end of the world. We've got to take advantage of these opportunities.
Thank you, Ali. Stephen, anything to add?
No.
He's got no time. I talked it all up. Sorry.
That's all right, though. We've got a lot talked about. Ali Jones, thank you for coming on the panel. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Stephen Franks, very nice to have your company too.
It's a pleasure, and Merry Christmas. Bye.
And to you. And now Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Kia ora everyone, tonight on Checkpoint, Easter shopping means Easter working. It's happening in Dunedin. What is happening at the Royal New Zealand Ballet and why will no one from the Royal New Zealand Ballet tell us? Former store managers at fast food chain KFC tell us they were told to manipulate rosters in the lead up to public holidays so the company could avoid giving staff a day in lieu. A Checkpoint investigation coming up tonight. Plus the weather here and in California where the wildfires are burning. What is happening, the latest on the Americans, the embassy, Trump and Jerusalem, and much more coming up after Anna with the news.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Anna Thomas. Truck drivers are warning of the dangers when lane merge on two stretches of new high-speed roads. The Transport Agency has increased the speed limit to 110 kilometres an hour on the Cambridge section of State Highway 1 and the Tauranga Eastern Link toll road. But truck driver David says it could be dangerous when trucks and cars move back into the 100 kilometre zone.
I think the biggest problem will be where trucks are travelling at 90k and you'll get cars trying to overtake you at the end of a passing lane at 110k, and that 20 kilometres would be a huge difference.
David says he has close calls every day. The Transport Agency's Director of Safety, Harry Wilson, says he's aware of the problem and it was factored into the new design. The Chief Executive of the Super Fund, Adrian Orr, has been appointed as the new Reserve Bank Governor. He'll take up the role on March the 27th next year. The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, says he's delighted the bank's board has been able to secure a governor with such a strong track record of delivery and public service.
This will be an appointment that will be welcomed right across the financial sector. Mr. Orr is highly regarded. He does, as I say, have expertise in the technical sense from his time at the bank previously, and is obviously a very well-respected CEO as well.
Grant Robertson thanked the acting Governor Grant Spencer for his work in the role and wished him all the best. The Auckland Council says it's only allowing the Managing Director of Briscoe's to have 3 helicopter flights a week to and from his new Herne Bay home because that's the scenario Rod Duke's own noise expert based his assessment on. Mr Duke and his wife Patricia have launched proceedings in the Environment Court after the Council rejected their application for 6 flights a week. Anusha Bradley reports.
The Council's Resource Consents Manager, Mark White, says more flights would have required Mr Duke's consent application to be publicly notified and more noise assessment to be done. The Council will send noise experts to the property to determine the number of flights that can be made, and it will update the Environment Court on Friday. Mr Duke says he needs a helicopter more than 3 times a week in order to play golf in Taupo and Mangawhai, as well as show international visitors around Auckland. This is Anusha Bradley.
Parts of the country are feeling the impact of the dry spell, with water restrictions already in place in some regions. This morning, the Christchurch City Council decided not to impose water restrictions for now. But Met Service meteorologist Lisa Murray says it's unusual to have such high temperatures throughout the spring. And she says any moisture that was in the soil has evaporated very quickly.
A lot of places around the country are really feeling the pinch of this dry spell that we've had, and there is water restrictions for the likes of Wellington, Napier and Southland already, and a few other regions too are considering it, certainly.
Lisa Murray says regions that are very dry will need at least 20 to 30 millimetres of rain to make any impact on soil moisture. The Ministry for Vulnerable Children will have the word vulnerable scrubbed from its title. The rebrand will be rolled out over 1 year and will cost roughly $420,000 to update signage, stationery and a technical system. The full cost will come from within the current budget. The new Minister, Tracy Martin, says the ministry should be geared towards the welfare of all children. DNA analysis of a suspected rat dropping on a predator-free Kakapo sanctuary has revealed it is likely to have come from kereru. Pest detector dogs and additional traps were brought on to Whenua Hou or Codfish Island last week after the dropping was found. The Department of Conservation was alarmed because it didn't look like normal kereru dropping. But DOC's Murahiku Operations Manager Tony Preston says the department would much rather deal with a strange kereru poo than a rat incursion. Fresh evacuations have been ordered after the largest of the wildfires raging in Southern California burns out of control. Fanned by winds, the resurgent Thomas fire now threatens the coastal city of Santa Barbara. In Santa Barbara, Tracy Lear from KEYT TV says the fire is still beating attempts to quell it.
It's moved north, which is threatening people that hadn't been threatened before. And so there are mandatory evacuations in Santa Barbara County's most beautiful neighborhoods like Montecito and Carpinteria. A lot of people live there and a lot of celebrities live there, and they are taking this really seriously because it's in the back country and it is threatening homes. There's still more than 4,400 firefighters from about 12 states here, and they are going door to door. A lot of people evacuated overnight, and they're not letting people go back in once there's a mandatory evacuation.
Tracy Lear in Santa Barbara. It's 5:05. To sport in the West Indies will have to create cricket history if they're to win the second test against New Zealand in Hamilton. The Black Caps a short time ago were 237 for 7 in their second innings, an overall lead of 389. The highest successful run chase in a test in New Zealand was when the Windies chased down 345 to win a test at Eden Park in Auckland in 1969. Ross Taylor on 84 is closing in on his 17th Test century, which would put him at the top of most centuries by a New Zealand batsman, alongside the late Martin Crowe and current New Zealand skipper Kane Williamson. The former All Black international and Samoa coach Alama Ieremia has been appointed coach of the Auckland provincial side for the next 3 years. The 47-year-old Ieremia was appointed head coach of Samoa last year, but resigned in August after 4 successive losses, with Samoa finishing last in the Pacific Nations Cup and their world ranking slipping to 16th, its lowest ever. He's previously also had coaching stints at Japanese club Suntory, was assistant coach at Wellington under Jamie Joseph in 2007, and had a 5-year stint as Hurricanes assistant coach between 2009 and 2014. Ieremia will take up his new role with Auckland in the new year. The New Zealand track cyclists have continued their strong form at the latest World Cup round in Chile. After yesterday winning gold in the women's team pursuit and men's Madison, New Zealand has done the same in the men's team pursuit and women's Madison. And that's the news.
Helicopters grounded.
They can only land the helicopter at their Herne Bay property 3 times and take off 3 times every week.
Buses hit speed wobbles.
Good providers who've been basically priced out of the market because they haven't been willing or been able to undercut.
And it's slow on the roads.
We're literally going 10 kilometres an hour. And we've been going 110 for the past, 10 Ks or so.
Tune in while you wait. Morning Report with Guy and Espiner and Kim Hill, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, Dr Jan Wright on 10 years as Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, her concerns, achievements and what comes next. And after 10, Australia's most popular scientist, Dr Karl Kruszelnicki, on why air conditioning is sexist and why shouting at your computer is bad for it. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And now the Met Service forecast until midnight. Tomorrow for Northland, scattered showers, some heavy and possibly thundery tomorrow afternoon. Auckland to Taumaranui, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Tahepe. A few showers, some heavy and possibly thundery inland, but they should all clear tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine weather apart from a few afternoon and evening showers today and tomorrow. Some heavy and possibly thundery about the ranges. Taranaki to Wellington, also whited up, and Nelson and Marlborough fine weather. And for Canterbury, fine but occasional rain from tomorrow morning. Buller and Westland, a few showers, turning to rain in Westland today and Buller tomorrow, possibly thundery. Rain clearing from Westland tomorrow evening. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, rain spreading north with heavy falls in Fiordland, but the rain will ease to a few showers in Southland and Fiordland tonight and Otago tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, often cloudy. RNZ National, it's just about 9 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna Thomas. Ross Taylor on 95 in his bid to get his 17th Test century. We will keep an eye on him, of course, as he bats in Hamilton. Coming up, we go to Dunedin, where the council's voted to allow Easter trading next year to cash in on the bonanza. That will be the Ed Sheeran concert in the city on Easter Sunday. Will it be a bonanza for workers? We look at that shortly. The city's mayor says he'll be watching for any sign of exploitation. But before that, another story about public holidays and workers. Former store managers at fast food chain KFC say they were told to manipulate rosters in the lead up to public holidays so the company could avoid giving staff a day in lieu. The boss of Restaurant Brands, which owns KFC along with Pizza Hut, Starbucks and Carl's Jr., has denied the allegations. Checkpoint has spoken to 5 former managers who say they were explicitly told which employees needed to be rostered off to control labour costs. Checkpoint understands the practice stopped when 0-hour contracts started being phased out in 2015. The allegations came at the same time as a government investigation into Restaurant Brands and whether it's been giving staff their public holiday entitlements. Zach Fleming is our reporter.
Andrea Melville worked at KFC for 17 years. She left in 2015.
Anyone who worked 3 consecutive days, we had to change the roster so that person didn't work the 4th one, so that they didn't get paid if we rostered them off on the public holiday.
She says she was sent an Excel spreadsheet unofficially named a yellow list in the lead up to every public holiday.
Our area managers sent them to us, to the store, so it would come from the payroll at the head office.
So head office of KFC was asking you to change your rosters around so they could avoid paying days in lieu?
That's right.
3 other former store managers who spoke to Checkpoint on the condition of anonymity say they were sent yellow lists by their area managers and payroll too.
They highlight in yellow color, so that's why they call it yellow list. So people need to be swap around the highlighted in yellow color.
So we have to shuffle, all the staff members. So we were trying to give them a day off or so like that.
They try to take them off of the roster, don't put them on roster. So if they don't put on roster, they won't be paid in 1 extra day.
And Mike Treen, the president of Unite Union, which looks after fast food workers, is also familiar with yellow lists. When was the first time you can remember hearing about one?
Oh, right from the beginning when we were first negotiating with the company in 2004 and 2005 around the collective agreements. Yeah. So over a decade ago. But
Russell Creedy, who's been the CEO of Restaurant Brands since 2007, says he's never heard of a yellow list.
No, I'm not familiar with that. It doesn't... Yeah, what I'm saying is I don't know about it. I haven't seen it.
To understand why store managers would have shuffled workers' shifts, let's use Christmas Day as an example. Employees at KFC on flexible rosters would be entitled to a day in lieu if they worked 3 of the 4 Mondays leading up to Christmas, because then Monday would be considered their working day. But if they weren't rostered on 3 of those 4 Mondays, even if they worked every other Monday that year, no day in lieu. Andrea Melville says she was praised for following yellow lists, as shown in an email sent to her and other store managers in February 2011 by her former boss, who Checkpoint has chosen not to name, KFC's area manager for much of South Auckland.
Well done, team. Papatoetoe, Manukau, Central Papakura and Manurewa, all with no staff paid for no work on Monday, Auckland anniversary. You smart cookies.
Smart cookies for their rostering resulting in no days in lieu for staff who didn't work. I asked Russell Creedy what he thought of that email.
Well, yep. 2011, that's for us now, pretty long time ago. And we understood that the way rosters were created, the way halt days were handled was understood and agreed with the union and all employees at the time. So under the rules or under the way the collective worked at that stage, a store manager was able to roster people to ensure minimum cost, most effective use.
Is that acceptable for you as the CEO of Restaurant Brands that was done?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we agreed to change.
A change from 0 hours contracts to fixed shifts, where staff now agree on their working days, removing the otherwise working day debate, and the potential for managers to manipulate rosters. Unite Union's Mike Treen says he hasn't heard of yellow lists being used at KFC for several years now. But Restaurant Brands is currently being investigated by the Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment over concerns employees within their business have not received their minimum public holiday employment entitlements. It's not known whether that relates to yellow lists. MB wouldn't elaborate, saying the work is ongoing. And Mr Creedy wouldn't speak about the investigation either.
No, not talking to you about that.
Okay, why not?
It's work in progress, so not talking to you.
Work in progress in the sense of...
Look, not answering you on these, okay? It's giving you an answer. It's work in progress. That's the end of it.
I asked Mr Creedy if KFC has ever had a policy where store managers were told to change their rosters to avoid paying days in lieu.
Gee, not that I'm aware of. There's no policy on that. If you going back to say, is an area manager or a store manager required to minimise costs, manage costs effectively at the time of drawing up a roster, certainly people are expected to act effectively and manage costs.
Manage costs. What does that mean? If you ask the former store managers, they say it means change rosters to avoid paying days in lieu.
You need to control the labor cost of your shop. That's a part of your job description.
They were just saying that Christmas holiday is coming, or public holiday is coming, so just watch out your roster. So that's it. So it means we have to do whatever we have to do.
We were told if we can't manage our stores properly and do what we're told, they'll find someone who can.
And by manage your stores properly, does that mean not pay your staff days in lieu?
That's right.
But if you ask CEO Russell Creedy...
Controlling labour costs is obviously a task of the store manager, just like any other cost. So everybody's expected to manage the business effectively. As far as minimising rosters to be effective, well, that's what their job is to do.
But as the CEO of Restaurant Brands, do you want store managers to be minimising the amount of days in lieu that are paid to staff purposely by changing the rosters leading up to public holidays?
Absolutely not.
So clearly, there's a historical disconnect between the CEO and some of his former area and store managers. The area manager who sent that congratulatory email to Andrea for manipulating her rosters so staff weren't given a day in lieu still works at KFC. Are you happy with her remaining working for KFC?
You said this happened in 2011. So the rules have changed. The way staff are contracted, the agreements have changed.
Are you happy with her continuing to work for KFC?
Under what reason would I be not happy?
I'm not implying a reason. I'm asking you, Russell, are you happy with her continuing to work for KFC?
Well, I don't see why I wouldn't.
Checkpoints tried to contact her, but she didn't return calls. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment wasn't able to say when it would conclude its investigation into Restaurant Brands. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Now, we would really love your feedback on this. You can text us on 2101. You can also tweet us, of course, at checkpointrnz, and our email address is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We would love to hear from you if you have any experience of the sort of thing that Zach was describing in that story. Just before we move on, Ross Taylor has just driven, he's just scored 4 to bring up his century. So he is 100 not out against the West Indies in Hamilton. Why is that so important? Well, it means that he joins Kane Williamson and Martin Crowe on 17 centuries, which is the highest number of centuries by a New Zealander. 3 of them sitting there now. Of course, Martin Crowe died a couple of years ago. Kane Williamson is still playing as well. Ross Taylor and Kane Williamson joining Martin Crowe on 17 Test centuries, the highest number of centuries by a New Zealander in Test cricket. Taylor 101 not out now in Hamilton. Let's stay with the subject of working or not working on stats. Dunedin's mayor says the city's employers will lose the right to trade on Easter Sunday if there's even a whiff of worker exploitation next April. What's happening? Well, the comment was made during a vigorous debate in which city councillors agreed to the shops opening for the first time next Easter Sunday. Why? to cope with an influx of Ed Sheeran concert goers. It's going to be a huge weekend in Dunedin. The bylaw went through by 10 votes to 5 after a vigorous debate this morning, backing a subcommittee's recommendation. Our Otago Southern reporter Ian Telfer was there.
All the arguments heard in an earlier public hearing came around again this morning. Should the 65,000 visitors coming to Dunedin next April for 3 Ed Sheeran concerts be able to shop? And would there be chaos or embarrassment if they can't? Councillor Damien Newell said the concerts on March 29, 31 and Sunday the 1st of April are a big deal.
I think this is an amazing opportunity for our city, the likes of which we're not likely to see anytime soon with this influx of people coming over one particular weekend.
But after a campaign by unions, councillors, whether for or against, had to keep referencing what it would mean for the city's retail workers.
This is about consistency rather than cherry-picking some businesses that can open and some businesses that can't open. It's about giving everyone that opportunity. Will they take it? Well, according to surveys, a lot won't, which means a lot of workers will not be put in any dodgy positions.
None of New Zealand's largest centres, Auckland, Wellington nor Christchurch, have gone for Easter Sunday trading, though many smaller tourist centres have. Councillor Aaron Hawkins said one weekend of concerts was a terrible reason to do it in Dunedin.
This is almost embarrassing, really, in its small town thinking. We've got visitors coming here from Auckland and Wellington and Christchurch. None of them, if they'd stayed at home, would have been able to go and buy the new Lee Child's book on Easter Sunday. I don't see why they would expect to be able to do that in here for that weekend.
Unions have strongly opposed the change, arguing it was taking away the only Sunday of the year workers were guaranteed the day off. But the argument was swung by an agreement to have the bylaw reviewed immediately after next Easter. The Mayor, Dave Cull, said that review would hold everyone to account.
We're putting the employers on notice that if we get a whiff of ill treatment or exploitation or abuse of staff, this is gone. This is the only time it will happen.
The decision pleased the Otago Chamber of Commerce, which describes it as a good news story for local businesses. But Jill Bint of First Union says the council stripped retail workers of one of only 3.5 days they don't have to work.
We're bitterly disappointed because we know what's going to happen. Unless the Labor government stands up right now and says, no, we're not going to do this, we're going to repeal that, we're going to stay with the status quo, we're going to end up opening every single Easter Sunday because the council says, well, we've reviewed it and that'll be fine.
Unions now plan to take their fight against Easter trading to the Labour-led government. I o te pōti, mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Ian Telfer, aho.
5:22. The Prime Minister has asked for a briefing on the unfolding crisis. Is that too strong a word at the Royal New Zealand Ballet? As reports emerged that up to 20 of the company's current 36 dancers are either leaving already or have not had their contracts renewed for next year. 20 of 36 is the number we're hearing. The PM is also the Minister for Arts, Culture and Heritage. Now, in the 2016 budget, her predecessor in the role, Maggie Barry, announced an increase in the National Ballet Company's annual funding, up 23% to $5.384 million. It's basically $5.4 million. But there's been conflict in the company lately since Artistic Director Patricia Barker joined earlier this year. Ms. Barker is also the Artistic Director of the Grand Rapids Ballet in Michigan and splits her time between New Zealand and the US. Nobody from the Royal New Zealand Ballet would speak to Checkpoint tonight, including Stephen Fife from the Ballet's Board of Trustees. No one. Mr. Fife sent us a media release saying 10 dancers had left the company since Ms. Barker arrived. But at a post-cabinet media conference a short time ago, Jacinda Ardern said she had concerns about the direction the company is heading in.
I've asked for briefings from the Ministry of Arts, Culture and Heritage. Of course, as you would expect, I take a keen interest in making sure that we have a successful Royal New Zealand Ballet Company. I also want to make sure that we are seeing New Zealanders grace our stage. And so what we're doing to support the flow of New Zealand dancers is equally something I think we should turn our minds to. But at the moment, it's something that I'm keeping an eye on and waiting to see how it's resolved. Yeah, at this stage, I am waiting to see what resolution is being sought. I want to see whether or not it can be worked through with those involved at a senior level first. I think they'd probably appreciate the ability to do that. I think they will have seen certainly my hopes and aspirations for them through the comments that I've made.
Ms Ardoon said she was also concerned that Royal New Zealand Ballet was not nurturing talent from the New Zealand School of Dance.
I think where we do have a role to play is at least making sure that the pathways into that field are strong, so that we're giving New Zealand dancers the best opportunity possible in a competitive environment. We've long talked about trying to improve those pathways across the arts and cultural sector through things like apprenticeships, which we don't tend to have entrenched as much in that sector. I do think there's some opportunity there for there to be training in the field using the New Zealand School of Dance. But those are things, as I understand, are actually being explored with the Royal New Zealand Ballet as we speak as well.
The Royal New Zealand Ballet's Board of Trustees spokesperson, Stephen Fife, said in a media release, he declined our invitation to be interviewed, that it had offered 3 contracts to students from the New Zealand School of Dance, 2 from 2017, 1 from 2016. 2 of those students have gone overseas and 1 will join the company next year. Mr Fife said Ms Barker brought a balance of artistic excellence, commercial acumen and a focus on developing and nurturing talent. He said one of Ms Barker's first recommendations was that the Royal New Zealand Ballet could do more to create pathways and opportunities to bring New Zealand talent into the company. We will continue to try to get someone, anyone at all from the company, to talk to us about what is going on and why. Let's go to California, where fresh evacuations have been ordered as the largest of the wildfires raging in Southern California continues to burn totally out of control. Fanned by pretty strong winds, the resurgent Thomas Fire now threatens the coastal city of Santa Barbara and nearby communities. Firefighters earlier reported progress in containing the blaze, which has devastated an area of some 630 square kilometres. That's just one fire that's burnt an area larger than Lake Taupo. CNN's Kyung La has the latest.
Unrelenting and growing as punishing winds and dry land fuel the largest of California's fires, the Thomas Fire.
It's not a house-by-house fight yet. We're trying to prevent that. And, you know, if we can get the wind to cooperate with us, the wind's definitely picking up now.
So you've been hitting it from the air as well as working it from the ground?
Yeah, correct. The helicopters have been a huge help.
You can see the wind as it pushes the embers this way. All of these embers fly towards the houses that haven't burned yet.
Firefighters they're busy.
Exhausted, and in the back of this truck, injured. Thousands of firefighters weary after nearly a week battling wildfires raging across Southern California. In northern San Diego County, homes burned in minutes. A wildfire spreading so fast, terrified thoroughbred horses ran in circles trapped. Others burned alive in their barns. Some horses barely made it out. Their trainer's escape route burning around them.
We got 5 heading out of San Luis Rey.
This entire neighborhood disappeared in just 20 minutes. Daylight revealed all that was lost. In Los Angeles' Bel Air neighborhood, hillsides and mansions burned. More people running from flames.
We just started panicking. We didn't know what to do. So we hadn't been told to evacuate, but we were going to evacuate. So we just started thinking, my husband said, just take anything that you think you might need. Everything can be replaced. Let's just get out of here.
Nearly 200,000 people in Southern California evacuated this week. Some returning to a home.
Hi, honey. It's me. The house is still there. Yeah, everything looks good.
Others digging through what's left.
There's not much, but if there's a few things that'll help them, have some connection to the past, then that's what I'm trying to do. It's what it is. Material stuff, but like you said, memories of a lot of years.
It has been 250 days here without any significant rain. The winds are forecasted to remain dangerous, so it is going to be a long night for firefighters. They are hoping that the winds die down so they can do night airdrops. They are the game changer here when trying to fight wildfire.
You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you. Lots of feedback coming in on the situation of workers far and wide. with stats and days off in lieu. We are delighted to hear from you, and we will get back to some of you. Thank you. Coming up on the program, hundreds of Christchurch residents have come out against a proposed ratepayer-funded $10 million grant to help restore the city's Anglican cathedral. We look at this. The Southern DHB, that's in Dunedin, of course, and Southland says it's finally cleared its backlog of urology patients after 2 weekend super clinics. That's good news, but it wouldn't let us speak to any of the patients who attended. All of that coming up. I'm just going to do something historic because it is now exactly 5:30, and here's the 5:30 headlines.
Whoa.
Thomas. 2 years. 2 years.
It's taken you 2 years.
Yeah,
I'm very pleased to be part of this milestone.
Off you go.
Okay. The 5:30 headlines. Former store managers at the fast food chain KFC say they were told to manipulate rosters in the lead up to public holidays so the company could avoid giving staff a day in lieu. Checkpoint has spoken to 5 former managers who say they were sent a spreadsheet unofficially called a yellow list, showing workers who needed to have their shifts changed were highlighted in yellow. The CEO of Restaurant Brands, Russell Creedy, says he's never seen or heard of a yellow list being used. Truck drivers are warning it could be dangerous when lanes merge on 2 stretches of new high-speed roads. The Transport Agency has increased the speed limit to 110 kilometres an hour on the Cambridge section of State Highway 1 and the Tauranga Eastern Link toll road. But a truck driver says it could be dangerous when trucks and cars move back into the 100 kilometre zone. The northbound lanes on Auckland Southern Motorway between the Papakura and Takanini off-ramps are now open after a jackknifed truck and trailer blocked traffic earlier this afternoon. But the Transport Agency says traffic is backed up in both directions and motorists should expect delays. The Ministry for Vulnerable Children will be rebranded as the Ministry for Children. The word vulnerable will be expunged at a cost of about $420,000. MedSafe will no longer allow surgical mesh to be used in some operations because of safety concerns. ACC has paid out more than $13 million in injury claims to hundreds of patients who have had problems with the mesh in the last decade. This afternoon, MedSafe announced it was restricting the use of surgical mesh. And Ross Taylor has scored his 17th Test century, equalling the record of most Test centuries for a New Zealand cricketer. Taylor now sits alongside the late Martin Crowe and current Black Cap skipper Kane Williamson at the top of the list. Taylor a short time ago was on 101 for New Zealand, 268 for 8 in their second innings, an overall lead of 420. And those are the headlines.
What's even more special about that cricket story is that Martin Crowe took Ross Taylor under his wing.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, it was lovely. Mentored him and gave him really good advice, I think. Ross Taylor's become better and better as the years have gone on. He's a very fine cricketer now. It's a lovely story, all those 3 boys sitting there on 17 centuries.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you, Anna Thomas. Right, let's look at business news now with Jonathan Mitchell. First up, Jonathan, nice to have you back with us on Checkpoint 2, by the way, beaming in out of the Wellington newsroom. The Reserve Bank is getting a new governor.
That's right. In the past hour or so, it's been announced that the head of the New Zealand Super Fund, Adrian Orr, will take over in March next year. Now, he was an early favourite for the job while downplaying it publicly. He takes over from Graham Wheeler, who, as you remember, retired a few months ago. Grant Spencer's been filling in the role. So essentially, Adrian Orr returning to his old stomping ground. A few years ago, he was the Deputy Governor at the Reserve Bank. He has been in charge of the super fund for the past decade. It's currently worth around $37 billion. And a few years ago as well, he was chief economist at Westpac Bank. So he has the right credentials. He's a local man. He knows the local economy like the back of his hand. And he also knows Wellington as well. He's taken quite a hefty pay cut for the role, but it is the biggest role in banking in the country. So it comes with that as a draw card. He's quite a colourful and vivacious character, but he knows when to play it straight. And for a role like the Governor of the Reserve Bank, you have to play it straight sometimes. So the market was a little surprised by the news. It shot up around ½ cent against the US counterpart to 69 US cents. But yeah, Adrian Orr taking over March next year.
Yeah, that's considered a good get for the Reserve Bank, isn't it? And we will try and talk to Adrian Orr before he starts that job. Retail sales are up, according to new data, Jono.
That's right. This is electronic card data from Statistics New Zealand. That was out today. Strongest monthly climb since January. That was for November data. Driven, though, by fuel, which can be volatile and move around a bit. But nonetheless, core retail spending, which strips out fuel and cars and the like, did rise 0.8%. So that's respectable. We did have last month the Black Friday and Cyber Monday shopping days. So that was probably a bit of a draw card for people getting into the shops. There was overall rise for furniture, appliances, electronics and clothing as well. So quite broad base there and gives quite good momentum heading into the Christmas rush.
Yeah, not much of a rush on the markets today though. I hear fairly quiet by volume. But what was happening?
It did hit a new record high. It was up at the close 42 points, ends at 8,278. A Kiwi dollar still strong though, 68.9 US cents, 91.6 Australian. And we'll bring you more on Adrian Orr in the markets on Morning Report tomorrow.
Thank you very much indeed, Jonathan Mitchell, doing business this week out of Wellington. Retail rich lister Rod Duke says it's unfair that his helicopter use has been limited to 3 flights a week at his new Auckland home because his neighbours can use theirs twice as much. The Briscoes boss is taking Auckland Council to the Environment Court over its decision to restrict his chopper use at the new home he and his wife Patricia are building in the suburb of Herne Bay. They have consent to turn an old boat shed, which sits at the end of Sentinel Beach, an inner city beach, into a helicopter pad, but only if it's used no more than 3 times a week. But Mr Duke says that's unfair because his neighbours can use their helicopter pads twice as often. Anusha Bradley reports.
So I'm standing here in Sentinel Beach in the suburb of Herne Bay, which is one of Auckland's wealthiest suburbs. It has an absolutely stunning view of the Auckland Harbour Bridge, and it's a warm and sunny day this lunchtime, and there are about 10 people lying on the beach sunbathing. There's been a couple of people who have gone for dips, and you can hear in the background the hammering. That's the construction work that's taking place on Rod Duke's soon-to-be-built property. I'm standing here just by the old boat shed, which he has consent to turn into a helipad. The council says he can only use it 3 times a week. But at the other end of the beach, only a mere 50 metres away, is a property which has a consent to use its helipad 6 times a week. And Rod Duke says that's not fair. He wants the same too.
Well, I wanted the helicopter pad there, so I can travel more frequently and more conveniently to the spots I want to go to, and I've got a bunch of neighbours in the very, very close proximity who have 6 a week, and I thought it was fair that I got 6 a week.
Do you mind me asking, where do you travel and why so frequently by helicopter?
I travel to golf up and down the coast, down to Taupo, up to Mangawai. I have friends that come over from overseas. Might be nice to take them for a ride around Auckland, show them all the sights of Auckland, and it seems to me to be common practice for 6 to be the number.
But sunbathers on Sentinel Beach today had mixed views about Rod Duke's plans.
It would be very disturbing of the vibe down here. It's a quieter locals beach, and it's not really like that kind of place. It wouldn't be very nice. I probably would stop coming.
It would be really annoying while you're trying to sunbathe here, but
there would be no privacy whatsoever.
So it is quite far away and should be okay. He does own it, so he can do whatever. Yeah.
The Herne Bay Residents Association co-chair, Dirk Hudig, says he's only ever had one noise complaint from the almost daily use of the helicopter pad at the end of Sentinel Beach, belonging to the property investor Ben Cook. He says neighbours should have been notified about Mr Duke's consent application.
The pad being on the point is not as likely to cause offence as his one is, because his one is much closer to neighbours, as I can make out, and also basically on a beach, which is a public area often used for recreational activities.
Waitemata local board member Vernon Tarvis says the board did recommend to the council that the consent should be limited notified, which means neighbours and those who would be affected by a helicopter coming and going should be able to give submissions to the council. But Rod Duke says he has absolutely no idea why the council insists on restricting his helicopter flights when no one is opposed to the idea.
We've got neighbours' approval. There is a residence within 40 metres of me with 6 a week. There's another one within 200 metres who's got 6 a week. And all indications were that 6 a week was acceptable. And they've come back at the 12th hour, at the 11th hour and said, no, we're only going to do 3.
In a statement, Auckland Council says while Rod Duke did apply for 6 flights a week, it only granted 3 because that was what Mr Duke's noise expert based his assessment on. It says 3 flights per week meant only Mr Duke's immediate neighbours needed to be told about the consent, but 6 would require his application to be publicly notified. The council's now going to send noise experts to the property to determine how many flights can be made, and it will update the court on the matter this Friday. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
Dunedin Hospital's urology department has been under siege with massive waiting lists, appointment timeframes spiralling out of control and, as reported on Checkpoint, of course, lives shortened due to delays. 2 weekend super clinics hosted at the hospital and supported by urologists and other staff from outside of the area, in fact throughout the country, have finally cleared the department's backlog. But while the department's clinical leader, Al Hepburn, says steps have been taken to ensure the situation isn't repeated, the DHB refused Radio New Zealand access to patients attending the latest super clinic over the weekend. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has the story.
Anne-Marie King waited 18 months for her follow-up urology appointment at Dunedin Hospital, but she should have been seen within 6.
I sat down and was probably my name called within a couple of minutes. But, you know, there was just doctors coming out of nearly every room and calling people's names, and off people were going. It was just fantastic. The mood there seemed quite positive, like everyone was busy doing their own wee jobs, and it was just happening, you know, it was just great.
During the 2 super clinics, the first last month and the second over the weekend, Dunedin's urology department saw 600 patients who were overdue for appointments. The DHB says this included more than 300 follow-ups and more than 50 surgeries. Anne-Marie King was one of them. She attended the November clinic and says while she was relieved at news she had nothing seriously wrong, she has sympathy for the department's staff.
It's not the people themselves, it's the whole, there's just no support there, I don't think, for them either. Not enough money, is that what people are saying? I don't know if it's to do with money or not, but there's definitely some things lagging there, that's for sure.
The Southern DHB forbid Radio New Zealand from speaking with anyone attending last weekend's clinic, instead offering clinical leader Al Hepburn for an interview. He says it's not just clearing the backlog which has set the department up for the future, but the knowledge gleaned from working alongside colleagues from other hospitals around New Zealand who travelled to Dunedin and gave their time.
It's given us a lot of experience and exposure to these new ways of looking after patients and outpatients with regards to doing treatments or investigations at the time of their first appointment, which is new for Dunedin.
New for Dunedin, but common practice elsewhere. It means patients will now receive diagnostic procedures at their first specialist appointment, while in the past they have waited potentially months for them to take place at a follow-up. Mr Hepburn says awareness has been raised of the problems which were befalling the department, and as a result he will be disappointed if they are repeated in future.
Obviously we had a significant backlog with patients that have been waiting an unacceptable amount of time. It's allowed us to clear that backlog and start with a pretty clean slate so we can move forward without having to think about all these patients waiting and just deal with the patients that have been referred to us now.
Urological Society Chair Stephen Mark travelled from Christchurch to take part in both clinics.
There was a really big problem here before, and there's no question that would not have been managed in any other way simply by the staff who were here. So to come in out of ours, to have a change in process, to have people come in from out of town and do things that are quite different and challenging isn't an easy thing to take on board. So I think they've been really, really good, and I just want to reinforce that that's not an easy thing to do.
Stephen Mark says the mood among staff and patients was positive, especially considering the issues which underlined why the clinics were held. The Southern DHB is in the process of hiring further urology staff to bolster its ability to meet the needs of patients in future. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Moving around the country, but tonight let's go to Christchurch, where hundreds of residents have come out swinging against the proposed ratepayer-funded $10 million grant to help restore the city's Anglican cathedral. The Christchurch Cathedral was devastated by the Canterbury earthquakes, of course, and has lain desolate and broken in the city ever since. In September, the Anglican Synod voted to restore the building, which came with various funding pledges, including a $10 million grant from the Christchurch City Council. But, and there is often a but with this story, isn't there? After public consultation, the council found the majority of residents don't think ratepayers should foot part of the bill. Here's our reporter, Logan Church.
Just over half of more than 1,000 people who submitted on the proposed grant to restore the Christchurch Cathedral were against it. Sprayden resident Janet Begg is among them. She says the City Council should not waste a cent of ratepayers' money on it.
It's not one of the core functions of the Christchurch City Council. We're supposed to be a secular country, and our rates aren't supposed to go to propping up the Anglicans. We've got far more important things to be doing.
The campaign to restore the cathedral, at a cost of $104 million, already comes with significant financial support, including a separate $25 million pledge from the government. The Greater Christchurch Building Trust pledged another $13.5 million and believes it can raise more money. Celia Hogan, who is a direct descendant of the city's first Anglican bishop, Henry Harper, doesn't think a small rates increase is too much to ask for.
I think it's very affordable and it's something that's really beneficial for our city. It actually equates out to only being 23 cents per week, which is very minute, so $1 a month per ratepayer. And I think that a lot of the anger that's coming through in some of the submissions is probably deferred anger from other rate rises, which have actually been quite extreme.
In October, the Christchurch City Council voted to use targeted rates for the next 6 years to raise the $10 million if passed. Celia Hogan says the cathedral is historically significant to the city and warrants a ratepayer contribution towards its restoration.
The cathedral was one of the centerpieces of our city. Our city was designed around it, and it tells a story. It tells a story of our history. It tells a story of our ancestors.
But Janet Begg disagrees and reckons a modern design would have given the city a much-needed facelift.
I've looked at it when I've been in the square, and I've never thought that the Christchurch Cathedral Square was worth anything at all. It's never done anything for me. It's got no spirit, no soul, no excitement about it now that all the wonderful old cinemas have gone. And I look at it and I think it looks to me as if the ghosts live there.
The council grant also has the backing of the New Zealand Stonemasons Association. A spokesperson, Paul Gautron, says it will give some stonemasons a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Not only employment, but the chance to train apprentices, chance to have them experience working on a project like that. It's not something that happens on a regular basis in the UK either. It would be an honour for any stonemason to work on that building.
A panel consisting of Christchurch's councillors and the Mayor, Leanne Dalzell, will discuss the submissions on Thursday. In Ōtautahi for Checkpoint, call Logan Church tēnei.
12.5 to 6 on Checkpoint. Forecasters in the UK have issued more weather warnings as temperatures plummet below freezing in London. It comes after the British capital experienced its largest snowfall for nearly 5 years on Sunday, causing widespread travel disruption and 73 billion photos on social media. The BBC's Jessica Parker reports.
The sound of large queues forming at Luton Airport. For a time, all flights there were suspended, as they were at Birmingham. Cancellations or delays have also affected Heathrow, Stansted and East Midlands airports.
I left work early after a night shift to get here because of the snow, to find out my flight's been cancelled.
We really need to get home. We've got school tomorrow in France.
Rail passengers have suffered too, with delays on a number of lines, including those run by Chiltern, Cross Country, Virgin and the new West Midlands Rail, operating on its first day. The Met Office's amber weather warning stretched today from Wales to the Midlands to areas of the north, east and south of England. Here at Gerrard's Cross in Buckinghamshire, the pavements are either ice or slush. Cars are struggling through the main streets. Some of the smaller roads are impassable, and I've seen a number of vehicles getting into difficulties and having to be towed away. At one point, the RAC said it had been dealing with 5 breakdowns a minute. And combined with high winds, the weather's also caused power cuts. The energy supplier SSE says up to 24,000 homes in Oxfordshire, Berkshire and Wiltshire have been without electricity. But it wasn't all bad. There's been some impromptu sledging. These children were enjoying conditions in the Peak District.
I like it because where we live we never get any snow. I like snow because you can make snow angels and snowmen, and I find it really fun to do.
Forecasters are warning of freezing conditions in many areas overnight, bringing the possibility of further travel disruption in the morning.
Jessica Parker with that report. The leader of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, which won this year's Nobel Peace Prize, says the world is, and I quote, just one impulsive tantrum away from destruction by atomic weapons. Beatrice Fian was speaking at the ceremony to receive the prize in Oslo in direct reference to the current North Korean nuclear crisis. She used the prize ceremony to urge powerful nations to diffuse global tensions and give up their most destructive bombs. From Oslo, here's the ABC's James Glenday.
Trumpets sounded and a crowd featuring princesses and politicians applauded as a group set up in Melbourne a decade ago accepted the world's most prestigious Peace Prize. ICAN, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, has grown into a large global movement and found fame by successfully fighting for a controversial UN treaty to ban the bomb.
The story of nuclear weapons will have an ending. Will it be the end of nuclear weapons? Or will it be the end of us?
The group's leader, Beatrice Fian, used her acceptance speech to urge people across the globe to join the campaign and made a reference to the current tensions between the United States and North Korea.
The only rational course of action is to cease living under the conditions where our mutual destruction is only one impulsive tantrum away.
The group's success thus far has relied heavily on the support of survivors of nuclear weapons tests and explosions. Setsuko Thurlow, a Japanese survivor of Hiroshima, had some in tears as she described the smell of burning flesh and people with eyes hanging out of their heads in the wake of the World War II bombing.
We are not content to be victims. We refuse to wait for a fiery end or to slow poisoning of our world.
But the globe's great powers and most of their allies, like Australia, are not only not listening to the group, they're continuing to campaign against it. Most haven't signed the treaty because they believe nuclear deterrence is still necessary and may even prevent war. That fact has led a number of nuclear experts to question the decision to award the prize to ICAN because there's a chance its treaty will not achieve very much.
Yes, ICAN! Yes, ICAN!
As activists took part in the annual Nobel Torch March through the streets of Oslo, they claimed they'd reached a turning point in the journey to disarmament. It's far too early to say that yet. Many other Nobel Peace Prize ceremonies have been recorded by history as not much more than a few Norwegian niceties.
James Glenday reporting. Let's have a look at some sport now. New Zealand have declared in Hamilton 291 for 8, the Black Caps, 373 in their first innings. The Windies' first innings a disappointing 221. So that means New Zealand lead by 443, which means the West Indies need 444. 2 days left, and the test will be the highest score ever by a team to win a test match, batting last in New Zealand, if they get it. So the odds against them, but it's a flat old track and the Windies have a thing or two to prove. It has to be said they don't really like touring New Zealand that much, although people my age and older will remember an extraordinary tour, 30-odd years ago, maybe a bit more, when things turned very tense indeed. So the Windies need 444, chasing. The Black Caps have just declared 291 for 8. Ross Taylor having made the 17th century in his career to draw him level with Martin Crowe and Kane Williamson on 17. Taylor 107 not out. As all of this is taking place in Hamilton, further south, a more local derby was taking place over the weekend. Senior men's cricket, Kai Tangata against Waihola in the Otago, Clutha districts, probably a big old area that covers. But Kai Tangata were in a spot of bother, 2 players short, no one available. And then someone suggested Lily Patterson, a 15-year-old girl making waves in school cricket in the Deep South, but this isn't school cricket. And Lily's a girl, senior club cricket isn't mixed. And nevertheless, she got the call, and cometh the hour, cometh the young woman, because Lily took 3 for 39 and Kai Tangata won, so we called her.
Hello, Lily Patterson speaking.
Lily, it's John Campbell speaking from RNZ in Auckland. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Are you basking in the glory of your weekend?
Yeah.
What was it like?
Felt pretty good.
What do you bowl, Lily?
It's about medium pace.
Right arm over?
Yep.
And do you swing it away?
No, it's just seam up.
And so how did you get your wickets? How were the 3 guys out?
One was a stumping. The guy went to smack it. And the other 2 were both caught out.
And how old were the fellows that you got out, Lily?
They were about, I have no idea on average.
No, the problem when you're 15, everyone looks old, don't they? That's the problem with. I'm constantly struck by the fact that my children think my friends are elderly. So, but Lily, were they roughly the same age as your dad? A little bit older, a little bit younger? What are we talking about here?
Maybe a little bit younger.
Right. So really, I mean, you're getting out senior cricketers, aren't you? Senior adult cricketers.
Yeah.
And do you dream of playing for New Zealand one day?
Yeah, that would.
Yeah, it'd be cool, wouldn't it? Who are your heroes?
Yeah, that would be cool.
Who are your cricketing heroes?
Well, Susie Bates.
Yeah, she's a fantastic player. She's also a really wonderful person. Have you met her?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, and what was it like to meet her?
Awesome, because she's just so nice.
Did she give you some tips, some good tips?
Yeah, just to keep going at it and practicing.
Yeah, and do you practice a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good message there from Susie Bates. Practice does make perfect, or at least it improves you a lot. So do you think you're going to play for the seniors again?
I would like to.
Yeah. And what do you like at school?
I enjoy drama, English.
Well, you sound like a remarkable young woman to me, Lily. I'm going to write your name down, and when you play for New Zealand, I'll say I interviewed her when she was 15. Although you'll probably be playing for New Zealand in 2 or 3 years anyway, won't you? Am I getting a bit carried away there, Lily?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Susie Bates is right. You keep practicing, and it's lovely to talk to you.
Okay.
Okay. Congratulations on 3 wickets against the senior men.
Thanks for ringing, Lily. Thank you.
Is that your dad in the background?
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing I do as a dad. Can I talk to him briefly? Can you pass me over?
Oh, well, he's kind of on my cell phone on speaker.
Is he there? Is that you, Glenn? Are you there?
Well, he's on speaker on my cell phone.
Oh, right. So is he with you, or is something modern going on? Is he somewhere else?
Yeah, he's at work.
Oh, bloody hell, the modern world, eh? Okay, well, it's really nice to talk to you. Thanks, Lily, and thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
Okay, you take care.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Lily Patterson, who is 15. Make a note of that name. There have been more protests in the Arab and Muslim world against President Trump's decision to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Violence flared near the US embassy in Beirut. Thousands gathered to express their anger in the Moroccan capital. The protests came as spokesperson for the US Vice President Mike Pence strongly criticised the Palestinian Authority. With the latest on all of this, the BBC's Sebastian Usher reports.
Tear gas was fired into a crowd of around 1,000 protesters in Beirut as they tried to reach the US Embassy this morning. Effigies of President Trump and US flags were burned by angry groups of Palestinian refugees and Lebanese activists.
We are here to tell the US Embassy, the embassy of the aggressor, that Jerusalem is Arab, it was Arab, and it will stay Arab.
Large rallies have been held in the Moroccan capital Rabat and in Cairo too, as protesters try to build momentum across the region against President Trump's decision. In Istanbul, thousands turned out to hear President Erdogan launch a blistering attack on President Trump and Israel.
Israel, it is a terrorist state. Yes, terrorist. We will not abandon Jerusalem to the mercy of a state that kills children.
That earned him a fierce riposte from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said he wasn't used to receiving lectures on morality from a leader who bombs Kurdish villages. He also had an uncompromising message on Jerusalem.
It's always been our capital, and Jerusalem has never been the capital of any other people. I think the sooner the Palestinians come to grips with this reality, the sooner we'll move towards peace.
But as clashes again broke out near the fence between Gaza and Israel, many fear that Mr. Trump's move will reignite extremist violence.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. Former KFC store managers say they were asked to manipulate rosters in the lead up to public holidays so the company could avoid giving staff a day in lieu. Checkpoint has spoken to 5 former store managers who say they were sent an Excel spreadsheet unofficially called a yellow list in the weeks before public holidays. The managers say workers who needed their shifts changed so they would not be entitled to a day in lieu were highlighted in yellow. One former manager who worked at KFC for 17 years, Andrea Melville, told Checkpoint the lists were sent by either their area manager or payroll at KFC head office to control labour costs.
Anyone who worked 3 consecutive days, we had to change the roster so that person didn't work the 4th one, so that they didn't get paid if we rostered them off on the public holiday.
Andrea Melville. Mike Treen from the Unite Union says he hasn't heard of yellow lists being used at KFC since 0 hours contracts started being phased out in 2015. MedSafe will no longer allow surgical mesh to be used in some operations because of the risks. ACC has paid out more than $13 million in injury claims to hundreds of patients who had problems with the mesh in the last decade. This afternoon, MedSafe announced it is restricting its use. It will still be able to be used for hernia repair, but not for incontinence and organ prolapse. Similar restrictions are also put in place in Australia. Truck drivers are warning of the dangers when lanes merge on 2 stretches of new high-speed roads. The Transport Agency has increased the speed limit to 110 kilometres an hour on the Cambridge section of State Highway 1 and the Tauranga Eastern Link toll road. But a truck driver, David, says it could be dangerous when traffic goes back into the 100 kilometre zone. He says the biggest problem would be when cars travelling at 110 kilometres an hour at the end of the passing lane tried to pass a truck doing 90. David says he has close calls every day. The Transport Agency's Director of Safety, Harry Wilson, says he's aware of the problem and it was factored into the new design. The Ministry for Vulnerable Children will have the word vulnerable scrubbed from its title. The rebrand will be rolled out over 1 year and will cost about $420,000 to update signs, stationery and a technical system. The full cost will come from within the current budget. The new Minister, Tracy Martin, says the ministry should be geared towards the welfare of all children.
They felt it stigmatised them and the workers felt it stigmatised the children they worked with, and one of the things Oranga Tamariki is trying to do is to get the rest of New Zealand society to realise that these children are in circumstances where they need our support. We don't want them stigmatised so that people actually in communities don't reach out to help them.
The Minister for Children, Tracy Martin. Potentially toxic algae has been found in the Aparima River in Southland. The Southland Regional Council found the bacteria in the river at Thornbury in western Southland. The council says the algae occurs naturally but can increase rapidly during warmer weather or because of high levels of nutrient runoff from farming. It says the forecast for long, dry summer coming. It may lead to more algal blooms, so it will be monitoring lakes and rivers closely. The appointment of the Chief Executive of the Super Fund, Adrian Orr, to the role of the Reserve Bank Governor has taken the market by surprise. Infometrics Chief Forecaster Gareth Kiernan says Mr Orr will probably be taking a large pay cut to take up the role, vacated by the former Governor Graham Wheeler, who retired at the end of September. Mr Kiernan says Mr Orr wasn't seen as a front-runner for the job, although he has the right credentials.
You know, he's been there for a few years now, and this presents a new challenge, and in some respects going back to what he knows best given his previous experience at the Reserve Bank. So I think, you know, the challenge is there for him, and, you know, that probably makes up for some of the loss in pay that he's likely to be getting as a result of the change in job.
Infometrics Chief Forecaster Gareth Kiernan says the market will be comfortable with the appointment, which saw the Kiwi dollar spike up about 0.5 cent against the US dollar, above 69 US cents. The Met Service says many parts of the country are feeling the impact of the dry spell, with water restrictions already in place in some regions. This morning, the Christchurch City Council decided not to impose water restrictions for now, but Met Service says restrictions are already in place in Wellington, Napier and Southland. A meteorologist, Lisa Murray, says it's unusual to have such high temperatures throughout spring. She says any moisture that was in the soil has evaporated very quickly, and at least 20 to 30 millimetres of rain are needed to replace it. It's 6:05. Ross Taylor has joined Black Cap skipper Kane Williamson and the late Martin Crowe at the top of the list of most centuries by a New Zealand cricketer. Taylor has brought up his 17th Test century on day 3 of the second Test against the West Indies in Hamilton, and finished unbeaten on 107, with New Zealand declaring a short time ago at 291 for 8, an overall lead of 443. The Windies will have to make cricket history if they're to win the Test. The highest successful run chase in a Test in New Zealand was when the Windies chased down 345 to win at Eden Park in Auckland in 1969. After come-from-behind wins over England in the quarterfinals and South Africa in the semi-finals, New Zealand trounced Argentina 38-14 to win the second round of the new 7 season in Cape Town. It's the team's first World Series win since March last year, and a huge relief for skipper Scott Curry.
It could have gone either way after we lost the first game against USA, and for the boys to bounce back and played like we did the rest of the weekend, yeah, massively proud.
Scott Curry. And New Zealand Ice Hockey says 2 players who have been suspended from the sport for 2 years for buying banned performance-enhancing drugs were naive. Brothers Mitchell and Lachlan Freer are the first among 100 athletes who are likely to be suspended from their respective sports for buying the banned drug clenbuterol online. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, James Beattie and Richard Bullen, remembering a visit of prominent New Zealanders to China at the height of the Cold War and the legacy that's now in the Canterbury Museum. We have a window on the world of African cuisine, and this week's pundit, our psychologist Michael Phillip, considers narcissism. Are we in the midst of a social media spread global epidemic? Find out on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And looking at the short forecast now until midnight tomorrow for Northland, scattered showers. Some heavy and possibly thundery tomorrow afternoon. Auckland to Taumaranui, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taihape. A few showers, some heavy and possibly thundery inland, but they should clear tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine, apart from a few afternoon and evening showers today and tomorrow. There will be some heavy falls and possibly thundery about the ranges. Taranaki to Wellington, also Wairarapa, Nelson and Marlborough, and also Canterbury, fine weather, but occasional rain from tomorrow morning for Canterbury. Bulla and Westland, a few showers, turning to rain in Westland today and Bulla tomorrow, possibly thundery. The rain will clear though from Westland tomorrow evening. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, rain spreading north with heavy falls in Fiordland. The rain will ease to a few showers in Southland and Fiordland tonight and Otago tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, often cloudy. RNZ National, it's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
And with Anna Thomas reading the news, we had a lovely text. Hi John, I had the pleasure of going to high school for a couple of years with the lovely Anna Thomas.
Oh.
And it truly does have one of the great voices on radio. Wait, I'm just going to read more. She can make even miserable news sound good. Isn't that lovely?
Oh, that's very lovely. I must find out who that is.
Yeah, well, that will give you the number and you can give them a call.
Oh, great.
You
Thanks
have a
so
reunion.
much.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. You are with Checkpoint. Let's look at truck drivers and their concerns that new speed limits on two of the country's safest roads could be dangerous because it widens the speed gap between heavy and ordinary vehicles. Now, we're talking about motorists driving the Cambridge section of the Waikato Expressway and the Tauranga East Link toll road, who are now allowed to travel at 110 k's an hour. But the rules don't change for truck drivers who have to keep to the 90 k speed limit for heavy vehicles. And the truckies say, well, they fear it could cause chaos on parts of the road where the two lanes merge. If you were watching, you would have seen me doing a merging motion then. Laura Tupou travelled the Waikato Expressway today.
David won't tell me how many years he's been driving his truck. He says it would mean he would have to tell me his age. He met his colleague at the petrol station at Karapiro this morning, just past the Waikato Expressway, to switch trucks. It's a route he regularly travels, and with the increase in speed limit for cars, he's anticipating some issues.
I think the biggest problem will be where trucks are travelling at 90 k and you'll get cars trying to overtake you at the end of a passing lane at 110 k, and that 20 kilometres would be a huge difference, especially to oncoming traffic.
When he's in his driver's seat, about 9 feet above everyone else, he has a bird's eye view of the road and other drivers. He says it'll be where the lanes go from 2 to 1 that will be the most problematic.
If you look around, you'll see that cars try to overtake trucks at the very end. They just try to get that little bit ahead of them, and that's where the trouble will be.
Have you had any close calls?
Oh, you have it every day if you're a truck driver, but I wouldn't increase the limit of trucks. I'd rather have the limit on cars stay the same.
His colleague, Michael Bingham, agrees, but says it's already an issue because motorists already push the speed limit.
They already do it anyway, so they just slow down when they see a cop, so yeah. As long as it's a good bit of road, I suppose it's all right.
And that's exactly what the Transport Agency's Director of Safety, Harry Wilson, says. He says the issue is well known to them.
A truck can't pull over simply to the left and go into a shoulder. Drivers need to be extremely cautious when they're coming to the end, which is well signposted. But we also have engineering treatments that actually make sense to people about the merging areas.
He says the design features mean the road is safer than others, with characteristics like having 2 lanes in each direction and having median barriers. So with that, I decided to see what the road would be like for a truck driver, and the cars did indeed nip past. So it's pretty slow. Those 2 cars just zoomed right past me. Now they're more than 100 metres in front of me. So you can definitely see the speed difference between a truck and a car. Despite the problems for truck drivers, for those who could increase their speed, there were mixed reviews on the move.
People would be quite happy to do 110 because 100 was too slow anyway.
If the speed up, I'm happy. I can short time go home.
Well, I think the faster you go, the more damage you do. I think if you get 110, you get people that will be then doing 115. And you don't have the control that you do when you're going 100.
Didn't even really notice it really. Just felt like with normal speed, like it wasn't too much faster.
When we got to the end of the expressway, it goes down to 100. I think a lot of people will make plenty of mistakes from that. They'll get a speed ticket, they'll think they're still 110.
The Transport Agency says these are just the first 2 roads to introduce the new limit, but they'll be rolling out more. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Laura Tupou aho.
Thanks, Laura. Large trucks are featuring more and more in serious accidents. Lots of texts coming in on this already, encouraging to travel at night, and centres would take a lot of stress off our roads. This is Stuart from Christchurch. Thank you, Stuart. This person says, I drove the Tauranga Eastern Link today. There is no point in the 110 k section where the traffic merges, not an issue. We'll look at that. Thank you. Surgical mesh will no longer be used in gynecological operations on women because of safety concerns. ACC has paid out more than $13 million in injury claims to hundreds of patients who had problems with the mesh in the last decade. This afternoon, MedSafe announced the mesh would no longer be able to be used for the repair of pelvic organ prolapse or stress urinary incontinence. Stuart Jessamine from the Ministry of Health says Australia decided to restrict the use of mesh last month, and he spoke to our reporter Kate Pereira Garcia.
They had reviewed data, including some newly published studies, and had concluded that the risk of using surgical mesh to treat pelvic organ prolapse and stress urinary incontinence by far outweighed any possible benefits. We asked the TGA to supply us with their assessment and with the raw data, and we spent last week reviewing that data and came to the conclusion that the Australians had got it right. From the 4th of January, for most companies, these products will not be available for use in the treatment of pelvic organ prolapse or stress urinary incontinence.
But they will remain in use for other surgeries?
It's still used in other types of surgery, like the hernia repair. And at this point in time, Australia is the only country in the world who has taken the actions. New Zealand's the second country to do this.
Why has it taken so long, and why do we have to wait for Australian data to make the decision?
No, well, in New Zealand, the use of mesh has been decreasing for about the last 4 or 5 years. Last year, there was less than 200 people in total had mesh used in any of those two indications. The answer to your question is that to be able to separate out, is this a problem with mesh? Is it a problem with the surgeons who are undertaking the surgery? Is it a problem, an issue of case selection? Requires a really big database of surgery and large-scale studies in tens of thousands of women. There's no doubt that for women who've had these surgeries, this has been a tragedy at personal level in up to 10 to 12% of women who've had mesh used in this way. And it's something that there are major lessons for all regulators around the world to learn going forward, that with surgical devices, you do need more research, you do need more studies before they come into common use.
The Minister of Health, Stuart Jessamine, talking to Kate Pereira Garcia a short time ago. We would love to hear from you if you have had experiences of surgical mesh in gynecological operations. Do text us 21001 or you can email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. It is 16 minutes past 6. Thank you for being with us. The Finance Minister, or Finance Minister, says the new central bank governor has the experience to lead the Reserve Bank through a period of change. Grant Robertson announced this afternoon that the head of the New Zealand Super Fund, Adrian Elwell, will take up the role of RBNZ Governor from the end of March next year. Mr Robertson says he's delighted the central bank has been able to secure a governor with such a strong track record of delivery and also of public service.
He also has the technical skills to be in this role as a former Deputy Governor of the bank, and also as the leader of the Super Fund has shown his credentials as a CEO. Further, I think he also has the skills necessary to successfully lead the Reserve Bank through a period of change. The Reserve Bank Board made a unanimous recommendation of Mr Orr to me. The structure of the Reserve Bank Act is that they make a recommendation and then I make a decision to either accept that or not, and then go forward to appointment. I am very pleased to be able to go forward and appoint Mr Orr to that role. In accordance with the Reserve Bank Act, a new policy targets agreement will need to be signed with Mr Orr before he takes up the role. We will do that once we have completed the first phase of the work of the Reserve Bank Act review. That obviously is the phase that deals with the broadening of the objectives and the decision-making process for the bank. We won't have been able to pass legislation by that point in time, but it will be possible to use the recommendations of the first phase of the review in drafting up the policy targets agreement.
Adrian Orr's salary as head of the Super Fund was the subject of some scrutiny earlier this year when it emerged he'd received a 23% pay increase. Despite objections from the then Prime Minister Bill English, that lifted his pay to just over $1 million. Grant Robertson says Mr Orr's new salary is yet to be negotiated.
So obviously that is a matter for negotiation finally between him and the board, but the board chair has told me that it will be within the range of the current governor, which, to state the obvious, will be a significant pay cut for Mr Orr.
A significant pay cut. Finance Minister Grant Robertson. Mr Robertson thanked the Acting Governor Grant Spencer for his work in the role and wished him all the best. You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. It's 6:18. Relief may be in sight for overheated South Islanders with a cool change forecast for tomorrow. This morning the Christchurch City Council decided not to impose water restrictions for now. But elsewhere in the island, many have been feeling the heat. Well, in Christchurch too, it's been very hot there. Katie Gossett reports.
Christchurch residents used 500 million litres of water at the weekend, the most water used in a weekend since the previous weekend, and that was the heaviest usage since 2009. A Christchurch City Council spokesperson, Tim Drennan, says if consumption gets much higher, water pressure could start to fall.
So at the moment the plant's basically running at capacity, so we're right on the cusp of having to implement water restrictions, but we haven't had any significant issues over the weekend, so they've made the call not to implement them just yet.
Water restrictions are already in place in Southland, where residents can't use automated sprinklers, leave hoses running unattended or use water for prolonged periods. And Environment Southland says while rain fell over the weekend, it wasn't enough to have any real impact on groundwater or river levels. In the Tasman district, rationing begins on the Waimea Plains today. The Christchurch City Council says its reservoirs are well maintained and the region is expecting rain and cooler temperatures tomorrow. However, Met Service meteorologist Lisa Murray warns that might not bring enough rain for some.
Unfortunately, those showers probably won't quench that dry in the soil. You know, we have some very severely dry areas, really tough on the farming community when the soils get that dry. And talking to farmers, what they've said to me is that they really need a good 20 to 30 millimetres of rain for it to make a difference.
But any drop in temperature would be welcomed at Christchurch Men's Prison, where some inmates have complained their cells are overheated. One prisoner was taken to hospital on Friday night. Corrections didn't respond to questions about whether this was heat-related, but in a statement, the acting prison director, Dave Pattinson, confirmed the man was found unresponsive in his cell.
A prisoner at Christchurch Men's Prison was taken to hospital on Friday night at approximately 10 p.m. following a medical event. He was assessed and treated and returned to the prison on Saturday afternoon.
Mr Pattinson says he met with prisoners from a different unit last week to resolve concerns about the cells being too hot. He says prisoners can use fans and have access to drinking water. Further south, some Temuka residents have been put off their drinking water after last week's discovery of asbestos in the town supply. A Timaru District Council spokesperson, Stephen Doran, says testing suggests the asbestos has come from a 7-kilometre section of the mains pipeline. Mr Doran says experts will consider either replacing the section or putting in a temporary filtration system. In the meantime, the council has been flushing out the water system through its hydrants.
It seems to show that there is a decrease in material being collected by those. And we've got loads of new samples coming in today, so hopefully that will show a continued decline in the material. But we are assuring people that the water is safe to drink if they just run it for a little while till it's clear.
Meanwhile, today, Mosgiel residents started getting chlorinated, fluoridated water from the Dunedin town supply, rather than the untreated bores used up until now. The change comes after the Dunedin City Council received advice that the risk of contamination of the bores was higher than previously thought. In Ototahi for Checkpoint, ko Katie Gossett tēnei.
It's a real change if you're in Christchurch or nearby. It's a high of 27 today. I think it may have got hotter than that, but the forecast high tomorrow 18 and Wednesday 19 with some rain. Not heavy, but some due, which I think will be very welcome. 6:22. Asylum seekers on Manus Island have provided videos showing locals threatening to kill them in their new accommodation. Dozens of asylum seekers were forcibly removed from Australia's decommissioned detention centre on the island last month and put into alternative accommodation close to local villages. Here's the ABC's PNG correspondent.
Outside the West House accommodation compound on Manus Island, a drunk man with what looks like a metal bar or pipe is threatening to kill the asylum seekers within. "You're dead meat," he says, before adding "me by killing you," which means "I'll kill you" in New Guinea Pidgin. The man was one of 4 who approached the main gate in the early hours of yesterday morning to make threats. Pakistani refugee Ijlal Haider watched the man's outburst.
The saying is, "I will kill you and don't come to outside."
Mr. Haider says it's not the first time locals have threatened refugees in their new housing, where they were forcibly taken 2 weeks ago.
Very dangerous. We every night afraid. We thinking they are coming to every night. That's why we are not safe here. So please help us.
The media and aid groups have been barred from entering the new accommodation. But earlier that evening, another drunk man was let inside the supposedly secure compound known as Hillside House. Security guards tried to cover up the incident, telling asylum seekers to delete their videos of the man's incursion. Iranian refugee and journalist Baruz Buchani says guards allowed the man to stay because he claimed to own the land.
He was there for about half an hour, but the security couldn't do anything because he was saying that this land is for me and it belongs to me and nobody can prevent me.
Mr. Buchani says the incidents show the growing anger of local people over the relocation of asylum seekers and refugees to the main town on Manus Island.
The problem is that these 2 places, Hillside and House, are located in a place exactly beside some of the local village, and it's really in high risk.
About 60 of the refugees on Manus Island will be flown to Port Moresby this week for further processing by the United States government and could be on their way to the US soon after that. But because the United States hasn't said how many refugees it will take, the hundreds of men who remain on Manus don't know if they'll have the same opportunity and don't know how long they'll have to remain on the island.
That's the ABC's Eric Torchik with that report from PNG. The magpie, believe it or not, has been crowned Australia's Bird of the Year in a poll model on New Zealand's Bird of the Year. The magpie stole victory from the controversial ibis, often referred to by Aussies as the bin chicken, or the bin chicken as they say across the ditch, for its rubbish bin diving antics in city parks. But the magpie won it. Go figure. Here's the ABC's Angus Randall.
It's one of Australia's most common birds, and now the magpie has been crowned our Bird of the Year. Sean Dooley is from BirdLife Australia.
They've got one of the most complex vocal songs of any bird in the world, and it's just so evocative, that carolling. But also people, what's really come through is magpies are very easily tameable, and people have this great connection with them.
Coming second was the controversial ibis, followed by the kookaburra, tawny frogmouth and the superb fairy wren. The ibis took an early lead when the poll was opened, causing outrage from those who dislike the city dweller. Sean Dooley believes the backlash further strengthened the resolve of those who love the animal dubbed the bin chicken.
This might have been our ibis face moment in Australia. It's kind of a bit of a Brexit vote, the backlash against the hate that's going out towards the ibis. And they are pretty remarkable birds, and they're very resilient. The reason that people don't like them is because they've come into cities like Sydney and Brisbane and they steal your lunch as you're trying to, eat your burger, and they'll snatch it out of your hands and they go into the bins. But they're only doing that because of conditions in their natural habitat, the wetlands that they live in the Murray-Darling, have been drained and altered.
It's the first poll to be held in Australia, but in New Zealand they've been running a similar contest for 13 years. Kimberly Collins is from New Zealand's Forest and Bird Group, which runs the competition. This year's victor was the Kia.
It's an alpine parrot that lives high up in our mountains, around alpine villages and in some of our mountain passes. It's a really charismatic and intelligent bird. It's known for coming down to car parks and, taking people's cars apart and getting into all sorts of trouble.
The New Zealand poll sees the country's rare and endangered birds face off. It's more than a popularity contest. The vote hopes to raise the profile of birds that are in danger of being wiped out.
New Zealand actually has 68% of our birds that are in trouble, and 1 in 3 are at risk of extinction. So we just want people to realise that and to take action to protect them.
And like other New Zealand icons that are borrowed by Australia, Kimberly Collins is following our contest with interest.
Like many of our Kiwi traditions, and things that we're proud of, you guys pinched the pavlova and you pinched phar lap already, so we're not surprised that you've also taken on Bird of the Year.
That's the ABC's Angus Randall with Kimberly Collins from Forest and Bird scoring a few points for New Zealand at the end of that report. A lot of feedback tonight on all the subjects we've covered. This from a listener in Canterbury says, had mesh for those 2 gynecological procedures about 8 years ago, and so far no problems. But every time its problems are pushed by the media, it's scary. It would help if the symptoms of problems were publicised more by you. That's a very good point, and we will try and find, because we've got your number, a link to the symptoms of problems and connect you with that. A lovely person saying, hi John, Checkpoint makes even Auckland traffic bearable. This person sits in the car so they can listen to us. Thank you. That's a really lovely text to receive. Lots of people complaining about commercial bottlers of water who still get to bottle their water and export it and make money out of it even when restrictions are on. And somebody saying they're going to stop paying their taxes if it costs 420 grand to take the word vulnerable out of the Ministry for Vulnerable Children. Thank you for being with us. That's Checkpoint for tonight.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Former KFC managers say they were asked to manipulate rosters so staff didn't get a day off in lieu for working public holidays. Surgical mesh will no longer be used in some operations because of the risks. Truck drivers warn the new high-speed roads pose more dangers for motorists. The Ministry for Vulnerable Children is to lose the word vulnerable from its title. The appointment of Adrian Orr as Reserve Bank Governor has taken the market by surprise, and a rise in the amount of hunted meat being sold through social media has prompted a health warning in the Ruapehu district. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with more news and weather at 7.
What are you supposed to be?
Everyone's talking about the new moving book. What are you supposed to be? It's in the RNZ treasure chest of kids' stories on the RNZ website. It's delightful and funny and moving. You really don't want to be left wondering what all the fuss is about. So check it out and have all your questions answered. You'll growl with delight.
Grrr!
Ooh, dear.
What are you supposed to be?
Find it now. Search for Children's Treasure Chest on the RNZ website, rnz.co.nz.
And this is Trending Now, our feature highlighting the stories you've been sharing via digital and social media. Now, the number of children having rotting teeth surgically removed has doubled in the past 10 years. Many dentists say it's all down to sugary drinks. The Dental Association spokesman, Dr. Rob Beagleholt, spoke with Wallace Chapman.
What got you so passionate about this issue, Rob? Because you're quite the advocate. We talked about physician advocacy actually last week on the show.